God has not forgotten what they did to you. They want you to just move on. They want you to stop talking about slavery. Stop talking about racism. Stop talking about injustice. But what they forget is God doesn't forget. The blood, the pains, the cries, they all still speak and heaven is listening. Because America believes time erases sin. She thinks because centuries have passed, the cries of the oppressed have gone silent. But the Bible says the blood cries out from the ground. Every slave beaten, every black man lynched, every woman violated, every child broken, their blood still testifies before God. They built an empire on your backs, then told you to be ungrateful, to be grateful. They stole labor, stole lands, stole lives, and call it freedom. But God has a record. And what man forgets, heaven remembers. This is why the shaking has begun. This is why confusion fills the nation. You cannot bury sin under flags and anthems and expect peace. You cannot rewrite the story and yet expect redemption. You cannot rewrite the story and expect redemption. Until there's repentance, there will be reckoning. And God is using the same people America tried to erase to remind her of the truth. Black America is a living witness, the proof that you can't curse what God has blessed. Your survival is the loudest sermon this nation will ever hear. Because every time they try to destroy you, God said, not this one. My hand is on them. So while they try to silence the truth, heaven is still speaking. God has not forgotten what they did. Anyways, watch these videos and I'll be back with a closing. Do not forget to subscribe, right? Credits to everyone you see on that, video. I'll be back with the commentary.
You know what irks me? I think that we do a disservice to our history in this country by referring or deferring to Nazi Germany in reference to horrors in this country. So hear me out. Nazi Germany is awful, and it's on the collective consciousness of much of the Western world because of its global impact during that time, right? Millions of people were killed. But I think that in America, in the United States, we deflect to Germany as a measure of state-sanctioned atrocities as a deflection from looking at ourselves. And I'm saying this as an American, as an American citizen, because we can always find, as black people, we can always find an American atrocity, state atrocity visited upon us as a more current, not all the time more current, but as a more relevant way to look at things or to compare things. We have 300 years of enslavement where some of the worst human atrocities took place over generations. And with such thoroughness, in every way imaginable, to babies, to grandparents, cradle to grave. And I mean violence, and that's physical, that's sexual, and cannibalism, and feeding our babies to alligators, and experimenting on black women, so that a significant number of the medical treatments for women were born out of the experimentation on black women to this day. We all know about Henrietta Lacks, but you go before that, learning about gynecology by experimenting on living black women with no anesthesia. We know that our babies were trafficked and used in all sorts of heinous ways. And we know that millions of us were killed. and millions of us were trapped in the system. We know that when you want to call, every time you see something bad in this country happening, so that's just like Nazi Germany, that's like Nazi Germany. And while that may be true, you can equally say, that's like America. That's like America. That's like our own history in this country. And I think by doing that, people absolve America, the United States, of its atrocities visited upon black people and indigenous people. And I'm not indigenous. I don't want to speak for indigenous people, but those who know American history know what the U.S. government did and is doing to the indigenous community. But speaking for black people, they bombed our cities. When you talk about how Nazi Germany took over Jewish businesses and other undesirables, they did that to us here. Not Nazis, Americans. Americans took our businesses. They bombed our towns. They burned our businesses. They destroyed our places of worship, the physical building and the people in them. The police force comes out of slave catching. They deputized white men and said, go catch slaves. They used dogs and horses to attack and round us up. They lynched us, and they put us in Nazi Germany, you call them gulags. They put us in American prisons that to this day are inhumane. And so I just think that too often we use Nazi Germany as a way to deflect from our own homegrown atrocities. And we even know, like it's documented that Nazi Germany used data that they collected from Americans experimenting on black people and torturing black people to inform some of what they end up doing. We know that. Like, that's documented history. And so I think we all do it. We do it in pop culture. We do it in movies and books. We use Nazi Germany as the standard for evil. And they're 6,000 miles away, and we got a standard for evil right here in this country, in the good old US of A. And I know black people know this, and I like white people to understand that using Nazi Germany as your standard for evil prevents you from understanding your own history in this country. It can be used as a standard for evil. And that can hurt the American psyche, but ultimately it will heal the American consciousness, because we can deal with what we have. And we know, black people know this, that because we haven't dealt with it, we have the problems we have today. And so one way to begin to deal with it, I'm not saying it's going to heal, but you can deal with it, is when you see atrocities in this country that are done by the state in any form or fashion, trust me, you can find an American representation to use as your example for why that's evil. And most of the time, that representation that you find, it will be the state doing it against black people. Almost all the time. And again, I'm not going to speak for indigenous folk. However, you can find it for indigenous folk as well. Happy Juneteenth.
All day today, I have felt this sadness in God's heart over the state of America. I mean, here we are in 2025, and we're still at war over black and brown skin, the amount of melanin that's in our skin. And our top justices, they use fancy words and fancy arguments to say it's okay to stop people because they have too much melanin in their skin. Did you know we've been doing that since day one in this nation? And you wonder why God's judgment is here. Maybe because we haven't learned anything in 400 years. Did anyone's parents ever teach them that you can't judge a book by its cover? Apparently not in America, because that seems to be our MO generation after generation after generation. And it's sad. It's just so sad that we can't see past outward appearances of race and ethnicity and simply see recognize that underneath it all, we are all made in the image of God.
It wouldn't matter. Listen, it wouldn't change anything. It won't make it won't make us feel any better, but it would just be, I don't even know the word. I'm a writer. I can't find the word right now, but it would be something to just have an acknowledgement that black people were right. We were right. Like we have sat in judgment of this nation and what it is, and all the worst attributes of this nation that we've always said were always there, and we were always gaslit that it wasn't there. You see it all being actualized under the Trump administration. The military weaponized against us, a whole new military created to get us, right? And not that they're not getting other citizens, particularly Latino, Hispanic citizens, immigrants and citizens. But where you find black people, you find his personal military. Corporate America turned their backs on us like they were so relieved and happy to do it. So relieved and happy to do it. Even sports, they got rid of all that Black Lives Matter stuff. Got rid of it all. Didn't care at all. Colleges, universities, they couldn't wait to end all their affirmative action, diversity, equity, inclusion, and whatever they called it. Anything that gave any focus to us, right? They didn't get rid of any of that legacy stuff, any of that stuff that gets wealthy white people into colleges and into those professor jobs and tenure track and all that stuff. They didn't get rid of any of that stuff. They got rid of everything having to do with black people. Corporate America, colleges, universities, and the U.S. government under Donald Trump and the military purged us out of everything. We've been right all along. And again, it's not going to change anything. It's not going to make us feel better to hear an acknowledgement. And I don't even know if I want to hear it, but I think I would like to say that every other minority in this country, every other one, every other non-black minority in this country, wherever you hail from, wherever your people from, it doesn't matter. Whatever mixture you have, everything that you have in this country, it's because of us. It's not because of white people. It's because of us. Every single thing. And everything that you are now afraid of that is being taken away, or you have existential fear about what's happening, it's because nobody listened to us. Everybody gaslit us. Every demographic gaslit us. Everybody. And so again, it's not going to make anybody feel better. It's not going to make us feel better to hear it. And maybe we just tell it to ourselves. We were right.
Wow, they didn't erase us by accident. They erased us on purpose. Let's talk about the most slept on part of our religious history. Black Catholics in America. Yeah, we been here before slave ships hit the South and before white Protestantism ran the block. Black Catholics were already worshiping in places like Louisiana, Maryland, Florida, Haiti, the Caribbean. We came through the French and Spanish colonies, bringing the cross and the culture. Haiti, a Catholic nation. And guess what? The Haitian Revolution, the only successful slave revolt in the Western Hemisphere, was led by Black Catholics that mixed the gospel with ancestral power. But what happened? White Protestant supremacy took over. They pushed that slave obedience theology. They called our incense, our chants, our saints, witchcraft. They told us to forget the ancestors, forget the drums, forget the fire. In the Catholic Church, they didn't shield us. They segregated us. Told us we could pray, but only in the back. Told us we can serve, but not lead. So we left for Baptists, AME, and Pentecostal churches, where we could breathe again. Meanwhile, Catholicism got whitened. White Jesus, European saints, Irish and Italian gatekeeping, and Black Catholics got buried beneath the surface. But here's the truth. We never left. Over 3 million Black Catholics are still here. We're still praising, we're still praying, and we're still preserving. And black Catholic saints like Moses the Black, Josephine Paquita, and Henriette DeLille, yeah, they're rising again. This ain't just about religion. This is about black memory, black spirituality, black survival. They tried to whitewash our saints, y'all. Erase our rituals, make faith a tool of control. But black spirituality doesn't die. It resurrects itself every single generation.
One of the first slave ships that brought black people to the New World was named Jesus. White Christians used Bible verses and Bible stories to justify slavery. There was a time when white Christians wouldn't baptize black people because they weren't sure if it was okay to enslave Christians. They quickly changed their theology, baptized their black slaves, and forthrightly sent them back to the fields to work. 4, both black and white prosperity preachers have scammed millions of dollars from faithful black parishioners living in American slums. 5, it is an undeniable fact that Christianity has been a tool of oppression for black people all throughout the world. And yet today, black Americans identify as Christians at a staggering 79%, higher than any other group in this country. So the question is, why are black people still Christians? And while we're at it, I actually think there's a more pressing, more existential question that needs an answer. Does God hate black people? In nearly every country on every continent around the world, darker-skinned people are treated poorly. By nearly every measurable standard, so-called black people are at the bottom of the social hierarchy everywhere. So much so that in majority black countries like Haiti and Nigeria, skin lightening creams are wildly popular. Anything to gain some proximity to whiteness and some distance from blackness. Africa is rich with natural resources, boundless human potential, unfathomable wisdom, and brilliant cultural traditions. And yet, colonial powers have pillaged, exploited, and divided nations and people in ways that are frankly irreparable, all without consequence. I mean, I don't know. You'd think that God would help us out a little bit. We've been through a lot, God. Maybe there's a Bible verse that we can look to. And the Lord will make you the head and not the tail. You shall be above only and not be beneath. Who is this verse about? Not only do black people identify as Christians at a higher rate, half of black Americans report attending church at least once a week. I was one of them. In fact, I was a pastor for a number of years. I've preached all over the country and world. I've given Bible studies. I've baptized folks. I have been in it, and these questions have been nagging me for a while. So in this video, we're going to get some answers. I talked to a couple of people. One of them is my friend Claudia.
My name is Claudia Allen.
She is easily one of the most conscious people I know. She's well-read, tapped into history and literature, a person who is thinking about race, class, and power in very critical ways. But she's also a Christian, a preacher, and a committed member of her church.
There is no other people group on the face of the planet who has experienced the kind of suffering that is akin to the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ like black and brown people. No other group.
Since she is well aware of what's happening in the world, I wanted to hear her reasons for keeping the faith. But I also spoke to Dr. Anthony B. Penn.
Well, my birth name is Anthony Bernard Penn, but most folks over the course of my life called me Tony.
He's a religious scholar, former pastor just like me, and now an atheist. And I think his perspective is important in this conversation.
Where is the historical evidence to support the claim that God is on the side of the oppressed, right? What is the historical evidence that suggests God is on the side of black folks in North America working on their behalf? Because every moment of progress has been countered.
And if you stick around at the end, I'll share how I'm thinking about my faith today. So let's dig in.
Because it was the white man, when they arrived here in the Americas, that slaughtered over 13 million natives. It was the white man that raped their women and daughters. It was the white man that destroyed their culture. It was the white man that took their language. It was the white man that devastated the beauty of what was here prior. And standing on the words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, when the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible and we had the land. They said, let us pray. We closed our eyes, and when we opened them, we had the Bible, and the white man had the land. See, it was the white man that went over to Africa and slaughtered millions, enslaved millions, destroyed their culture, their language, and the beauty that was there prior to us. Because see, I recall it was the white man who enslaved our black brothers and sisters once they took them from Africa here to the Americas. And for over 400 years, it's been the white man that has continued to enslave our black brothers and sisters. In fact, when they were prospering like Black Wall Street, it was the invasion of the white man that destroyed that city. It was the invasion of the white man onto the island of Puerto Rico that devastated the people that lived there. It was the white man that stepped foot into the islands and the nations of Haiti that once again devastated and left it to die. Because the reality is this: everywhere the white man has invaded, everywhere the white man has placed his foot, he has left it destroyed.
I'm not your judge. I'm not going to judge anyone for their beliefs. It's not up to me to judge. It's up to God. He's the one who judges us on what we do, on our actions, even on our thoughts, because he knows what we're thinking. You may not believe that, but he does. God sent many messengers and prophets down to earth to try and teach us humans how to be good, to do the right thing, to do the good thing, and to believe in God, and pray to God, and worship God. So many people these days don't do that. They don't even believe in God. They don't think he exists. Well, he does. Just look around you. Look around at the nature that we've got. Look at the mountains, the oceans, the sea, the countryside. Look at all that beauty. Well, you think that just happened by accident? You don't think God had anything to do with that? And all what's happening now, they call it climate change. Do you know, I don't think it is. I think it's God giving us a message. He's telling us he's not happy with humanity. He's not happy with what we're doing. So he's giving us messages. All these hurricanes, these floods, these earthquakes, and all the other disasters that are going around in the world. I don't think it's nature. I think it's God. He's given us messages. He's done it before in the past. He's handed out messages. He's shown civilizations that he wasn't happy with their actions. Just look at what happened with Lot and his wife. She got turned to a pillar of stone. So God, he doesn't issue his punishments one by one by one. And we know that he's very, very patient. More patient than us. And he doesn't forget. As humans, we forget. We forget a lot of things. We forget a lot of things that happened in the past. God doesn't forget. He knows.
I 100% believe that a lot of Republican American Christians would have absolutely hated Jesus if he was around today. The Good Samaritan of back then would have been the good Muslim of today. The Mary Magdalene washing Jesus' feet would have been a Mexican immigrant, an illegal one. Yeah, the prostitutes that he hung out with would have been transgender people. That man made it his mission to go to the most cast aside members of society and show them that they have a place with him. Oh, y'all, I'm telling you, they would have hated him. Oh, they would have hated him so bad. That man would have fed the 5,000 and they would have called him a socialist. Oh my God. What, Jesus? You don't want them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps? Are you crazy? Constantly being disgusted by and turning away anybody who doesn't look and act just like you. Yeah, that's not, you would have hated Jesus. You would have hated that man for sure. I remember growing up as a Christian and I had this one church leader. I'm not going to say like, I would not say that this man is like a bad person or anything. I would just say that like his views are a little interesting, right? Because I remember him telling me when I was younger that he does not like to give homeless people money. I remember asking why. And he said, it's because when you give them money, they're not going to know what to do with it. They're going to spend it on things, on like bad things, like essentially, right? But then a little bit later in life, I remember going to that same person and talking about like ranting about the fact that it just bothers me so much that rich people have they have such a plethora, they have so much and they can see so many people suffering and they would not be like, let me just take from this and just serve them, right? And this same man looked at me and said, I do not like to tell people what to do with the money that God has given them. Really? Because you see, when we were wallet watching the poor, that was acceptable. That was fine as a Christian. But doing the same to the rich, doing the same to the powerful, that's wrong. That's where we draw the line. See, in the Bible, Jesus had a lot of story examples. He had a lot of parables, right? And there was this one specific one where he talked about a poor widow and how she had almost nothing. She had almost no money left to her name. She had just two copper coins or whatever, right? Even knowing that she had nothing, she gave all of it, all of her nothing, to Jesus, right? She's just like, I'm just gonna give this all, right? She's giving more than even the richest people would. She had nothing, but she still gave it up to Jesus. If that man had been around and had given that message today, they would have called him a socialist. They would have called him a communist. They would have called that man everything but his name. It reminds me a lot of my mom growing up. My mom, I feel like, had that very big, generous Christian love where we were not rich, we lived in I know you're going to see this and you're going to be, you didn't have to say that, it's fine. We lived in a smaller house, right? And any family member, family friend was coming from out of town. She was like, don't you dare spend your money at a hotel. Even though I have this little space, it is for you. I will cook for you. You have the bed. Me and my kids will sleep on the floor, which was annoying, but we would do it. She had this whole entire thing. That was the example. That was the Christian example my mother set for me. I grew up and I went to college and I went to a Republican American Christian church. Republican first, American next, Christian last. That church, that kind of church, right? There was an international student that was attending there, and that student had run into some financial problems and they needed some place to stay. So they had some friends, stayed with those friends, but some of the members in the church were concerned about the legality of subletting or whatever. Just need to have this as a background. Multiple members of this church had spare bedrooms. Multiple. Lots of them had houses with spare bedrooms. And the church also had a spare house for whenever visitors came to town. Yes? Okay, so keep all of that in mind. This international student who was an avid member of that church, who was constantly helping, constantly putting their time in to help grow this church. They sat the student down, and instead of offering their place, instead of offering assistance, they said, maybe these troubles you're having are God's way of telling you that you should go back to your country. That is that Republican American Christian love right there. My mother would sooner die before she let something like that happen. I have a governor heavily supported by the Republican American Christians who just put into place a law that says that homeless people do not have the right to be sleeping in public spaces overnight. So they would be criminalized as homeless people for sleeping in public spaces overnight. And Republican American Christians would say, this is good. This is exactly what God would want me to support. This is what Jesus would want to happen. That is what they would tell me. Are you insane? Making a point to constantly demonize the poor, to constantly demonize the people who are the most ostracized from society, whilst also exalting the rich, exalting the most powerful, those who take the most advantage of society, those who the Bible warned me against. Not the kind of Christianity I want to support. Loving my neighbor with my whole heart and soul, that's the kind of Christianity I want. The kind of Christianity that others who are ostracized from society and ostracized from their own Christian churches feel comfortable coming to me about different things going on in their lives. That's the kind of Christian I want to be. Let me give you a quick definition of the modern day Pharisee. A modern day Pharisee is someone who follows the impulse to be seen as righteous by obeying certain laws while ignoring more important matters of the heart. Do you see that in yourself? Do you only surround yourself as a Christian with people who look like, act like, and think like you? Well, you still have time to be better. You still have time to change. Do with that what you will. Bye.
I once asked God about colonization and slavery. And if you are a Black person who is under the impression that God doesn't love you or love Black people because of slavery, because of colonization, I want you to listen to this because it set me free. So I asked God one time why it is that He allowed Black people to be enslaved and colonized. And that's because I have a relationship with God. And so I asked God these questions. And what God showed me through the scripture was that Black people were not the only, the first, or the last to be enslaved, and that Black people were not enslaved or colonized because of their Blackness, because of their skin color. Black people were made Black by God. Being Black is not some curse. It's not some mutation. It is a very intentional thing. God intentionally gave us the skin color He gave us, and He called it good. The reason, and when you look to scripture, if you read the Old Testament carefully, there's a clear pattern and clear explanation behind slavery and why certain nations were enslaved. In fact, when you read the Bible from Old Testament to New, you can see that even God's chosen people, the children of Israel, the lineage through which Jesus Christ came, they were not only enslaved, but colonized on multiple occasions, and God allowed it for a very specific reason. If you are to read through the Old Testament, read through Deuteronomy 28, for example, and read about the curses that God places upon people for certain things, this becomes more understandable. The reason in the Bible that so many people were enslaved and colonized by other nations is because they fell into idolatry and worship of false gods. And you might think, it's pretty harsh to allow a nation to be enslaved or colonized just because they're bowing down to an idol, isn't it? But you have to understand the kind of idolatry that these nations, these pagan nations that were subsequently enslaved throughout history were participating in involved things like child sacrifice, human sacrifice, gross sexual acts. And this isn't a secret. You can actually just look up the history of certain nations, like the Aztecs, for example, and see their religious practices. Much of this pagan worship and idolatry that God condemned in the Bible and that God used as a reason for allowing enslavement revolved around harming other human beings, revolved around killing innocent people in the name of worshiping false gods, killing children. There's a god called Moloch in which these pagan nations would bow down to, and what they would do is they would sacrifice their children to the fire of this god in order to acquire riches. And so even when the children of Israel, God's chosen people, during some point in history fell into the same kind of idolatry, he allowed them to become enslaved by different nations. And remember that during this time, there was no prison system like we have now. Now we have prison systems in which if people commit crimes, they can be placed into a physical prison. Back then, there were no real, systematic ways of imprisoning people. Of course, there were dungeons, but you couldn't place every single person in a dungeon. In comes slavery. In comes indentured servitude. And in fact, what do people call the modern day prison system, especially in the US? Don't they equate the modern day prison system in the United States as slavery? Think about it. But one thing that remained consistent in the Bible and throughout history is every single time people that were enslaved cried out to God, the God of heaven, the one true God, for their freedom, they were freed. You see that in the Bible, and you even see it in modern day history through African Americans who began to turn to God and cry kumbaya and were eventually freed from slavery. So slavery is not God hating African Americans. Slavery actually has nothing to do with skin color and race, but with idolatry and pagan worship that God explicitly condemns. Go read the Old Testament carefully and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. God bless you.
The reason people are concerned about the words they use, the reason Americans care about civil rights, the reason we are sensitive to racism is for one issue and one issue only, and that is how Black Americans were treated in this country. It is because of the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. Those do not compare. Irish, the new groups, they always get a little bad treatment. Do not compare that to how Blacks are treated in this country. You don't get to piggyback on the Black experience in America. You do not get to do that just because you are a woman, an immigrant, gay, Hispanic. No, the rest of you can go F yourselves. No, this is for Black Americans. We seem to have forgotten them. It's not a rainbow coalition.
Various groups, feminist, gay rights groups, and those who are defending immigrants have commandeered the Black civil rights experience.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
There is the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow laws. We don't owe the homeless. We don't owe feminists. We don't owe women who are desirous of having abortion. That's what civil rights has become for much of the left. Wait, could I just say, what have we done to the immigrants? We owe Black people something. We have a legacy of slavery. Immigrants haven't even been in this country. The Black experience is different from any other experience in America. There is slavery. There is Jim Crow. So I really do resent it. it. When people come along and say, well, you can't say the phrase illegal alien when you use the N-word. You can't say retard when you say the N-word. You can't say, I don't know, a million other things. They're always comparing it to the N-word. So the main point I want to make is no other word is like the N-word.
And Coulter for the win, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody saw that coming.
CNN, this is what I say. Ann Coulter, this is one of the first times I've ever agreed with Ann Coulter, and it's on CNN. Mark this down in your calendar. But Ann, you've always felt this way. This isn't new for you, right?
It's not only not new for me, this is standard Republican position. I mean, Justice Rehnquist,
and we're back.
Yeah, okay, hang on.
Now,
black people in Mississippi had to pay $2 to vote. The white folks didn't pay nothing.
In what year?
And what year was that? That was 1960.
1960. And what are you about to do today?
I'm about to vote free. I got victory in my feet.
Yes, Lord. I know that. Let me see what victory in the feet looks like. That's the victory in the feet.
Welcome back, everyone. Yeah. So now credits to everyone, like I said initially. Now let's get into the conclusion of it. The truth is, you can hide history, but you can't hide from judgment. You can change the story, but you can't change what God saw. The blood still cries, the truth still speaks, and God still remembers. This is not vengeance, it's divine justice. This is not vengeance, like I said. It is divine justice, because the same God who delivered Israel will deliver his people again. And this time the world will see who was truly chosen. That's my conclusion. I want to know what your thoughts are in the comments. Have you subscribed? Have you liked and shared this video already? Have you supported your sister Blessing? Right? Let's keep the momentum on. If it drops, I'm not going to be doing this video again, trust me. If it drops, I won't. Right? I'm so happy a lot of you are enjoying the series we are on to. And the thing is, we'll still keep saying these things, right? We'll still keep saying it until we see, right? We see the victory materialize. Then maybe we'll keep quiet and then celebrate, right? Thank you so much for listening. My name is Blessing on Global. Just with Beejay. I'll see you next time.